You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Scott Harper, who's running for Congress. He is running in the 13th Congressional District. He is the Democratic nominee. He is taking on Judy Biggert. She is the 10-year Republican incumbent. We'd like to have Judy on the show. We started talking with her a month or two ago about doing so. She was once on 4 years ago. Like to have her back. It's been a little slow, and we don't endorse candidates, but we do endorse the notion that everybody should do what Scott Harper is doing, which is coming out here and talking the issues and facing the issues and getting in touch through television as one vehicle with his voters and his perhaps future constituents. So thank you so much for coming, Scott. Very glad to see you.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
And if you're watching this show and you don't live in the 13th Congressional District, don't turn that dial, because we're going to be doing national issues of interest to everybody out there, whether we're talking about should we be drilling more oil wells offshore or not, should we be closing down that war, or should we continue to try to stabilize things in Iraq, should we be doing something about mortgages, or should we stay away, and maybe that's the best this country can do to see the economy return, or raise and lower taxes. So you see what I mean? These are all issues of importance to you. Whether you're in the 10th Congressional District, where Seals and Mark Kirk are going at it, or whether you're in the 11th, where it's Halverson and Ozinski, whether you're in the 14th, where it's Congressman Foster defending that district, one of a recently went Democratic in a special election, defending it against the Republican Jim Oberweis, whether you're in the 9th with Jan Schakowsky, or whether you're in the 8th with Bean and Greenberg going at it, or one of the 6 districts, I think it's 6 congressional districts that encompass part or all of the city of Chicago. For all of those districts, don't turn that dial, because Scott Harper's going to be talking very knowledgeably about public policy and politics. He knows a lot about those things. The 13th Congressional District includes, we'll talk more specifically as we get into the show, but it includes areas in DuPage County, in Will County, in Cook County. Scott Harper grew up in Naperville, went to Naperville Central High School, went to Wheaton College as an undergrad, Oxford, master's degree from Oxford University in England, University of Chicago MBA, started out as a manufacturing executive with a company there that was, were you involved in labor relations with that company?
I was. I was in the automotive industry, actually, and I was working very closely to broker agreements between management and labor, and was very trusted by both sides. And that's the kind of role that I'd love to play in the United States Congress, of working across the aisle and building sensible policies.
Being bipartisan?
Yes.
He started his own firm, Closer Look, built that from 2 people, staff of 2 to 40, $5 million in revenue, media design and marketing, sold that, or sold your interest so you could devote full time to running in the 13th Congressional District, and getting right into the issues. So we look at we're taping this on June 22nd. If you're watching it in the Chicago metro suburbs, it's the week of June 23rd. If you're watching it in Chicago or Aurora, and Aurora, of course, is in a portion of Aurora is certainly in the 13th Congressional District. You're watching it on June 30th, so we're wishing everybody a happy July 4th. And this country is a bit torn. We're hearing a lot as we're gearing up in the national election between Barack Obama, Democrat, John McCain, Republican. And some people say that race is going to give people a very clear choice on a number of issues. Nobody's going to be say there's no choice between McCain and Obama, whichever side you're on. When we talk about the 13th Congressional District, mentioned before the show, some very important issues that there may be a lot of differences on those issues between Judy Biggert, the Republican, and Scott Harper, the Democrat. The war, that would certainly seem to be one of those issues, because Judy Biggert, I believe, supported going into Iraq way back in 2002 or 2003 when we went in. I think voted to give the president authorization to take military action. Barack Obama said on the set of Public Affairs in November of 2002 he would not have voted, that vote had already occurred, to authorize the president to take military action. If Scott Harper was in Congress in 2002, you wouldn't have voted either to authorize the president to take military action, right?
That is correct, Jeff. In fact, at the very same time that Senator Obama was here talking with you, I was against the war from the beginning. I didn't think that it served our national security interests. And I'm very disappointed that Judy Biggert has voted 57 times on various resolutions and bills just to give the president a blank check on his Iraq policy, voted for over $500 billion in Iraq war spending with no timelines, no responsibility. And I think that that needs to change.
Much of the country, many of the leaders, Democratic and Republican, almost a majority, I believe, in the Senate of the Democratic Party voted to authorize the president to take military action. Many of the people who've run for president or were running, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Al Gore, as I recall, all voted to authorize. Well, I guess we wouldn't say Al Gore, because I guess he wasn't there at that time, but certainly John Kerry did, and John Edwards did, and Hillary Clinton did vote to authorize the president to take military action in Iraq if he chose to, if he decided it was necessary. And those folks certainly bought into the idea that there was weapons of mass destruction. Many of our allies and even our critics who were not allies bought into the notion there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But you, Scott Harper, sitting there in 2002, decided there weren't?
I thought that there might well be. I was very involved in following the debate. But clearly I wasn't a participant in the Senate debate or the House debate at that time. But it seemed to me at the time that there might well be chemical weapons. I had grave doubts about nuclear weapons in particular, and thought the case seemed particularly weak.
You thought there might be chemical weapons, which would be weapons of mass destruction. And
by
yet,
the definition that we had.
And yet you wouldn't have authorized the president to take military action to
I
do
would
anything
not.
about
I
that.
wanted to see the diplomatic negotiations play their course. I mean, remember, we had a very strict embargo at the time of and the no-fly zones in the south and in the north of Iraq. And Iraq was contained. And I didn't think that if Iraq had chemical weapons without missiles that could reach the United States, that that was a threat to our national security.
But now scroll forward to June of 2008. And now take a look at the situation. Many people have said it's been a rocky road, but security has improved, they would argue. They would argue security has improved in Iraq. The Iraqis have gotten better and closer to being able to defend themselves. They would argue that the surge has worked both militarily, diplomatically, economically. Certainly what John McCain would argue. They would argue 12 of 18 of the milestones have been achieved. And these are not simply military milestones that the surge set out as things that they were trying to accomplish. They would say there are provincial elections coming up, and if some have occurred, they would say the Sunni-Shia cooperation, at least locally, is much better than it was before. That a country is emerging and that the United States should try to wind up things. But these people would say, don't set a date certain, don't set a date for surrender, give Iraq a chance. Whether it was right to go into Iraq or not, that's, historians will argue about that, as we've discussed. But putting that aside, in terms of the future course of action, should the United States give the flexibility to Iraq, if they want it to stay, and it appears the government does, to ease out of there rather than say, as Barack Obama has done, we should be out of there in 16 months, a brigade a month, until basically many, but not all, of the combat troops. I think he would say get it down to 20 or 30,000 troops, although Barack's been a little vague on that. But more importantly, what does Scott Harper say? Because I understand you were against it, but given the situation, have I got it wrong? One of these people, or these people who say things have gotten better, 12 out of 18 milestones have been achieved, security is better, things are better in Iraq. Are they wrong?
Just you went quickly from the authorization to the surge.
Yeah. It's only a half-hour show.
Let me just circle back very quickly to the actual running of the war. Post-invasion, it was so badly mismanaged. The way we occupied the country and did not protect the Iraqi people, did not protect the infrastructure, did not invest as we said we were going to do, and had the wrong military strategy. But to your question, now that we're there, we have to deal with the facts on the ground. And I'm very pleased that the violence is down and that the surge has worked militarily. But let's not forget that the purpose of the surge was to allow a political space for the Iraqi government and the various factions in Iraq to work out their differences, whether it's community relations, whether it's the oil revenue, whether it's the role of militias.
Aren't they working those out? I think there's a tentative oil sharing agreement among the three major groups, the Sunni, the Shia, and the Kurds. Am I wrong on that?
It seems like there is some movement,
right.
But it's certainly not the milestones that we set at the beginning of the surge. They're not accomplished.
But some of the political milestones have been reached in addition to the military milestones. You would agree, 12 out of 18. They weren't all 12 of those weren't military, right?
Can I just follow back to the surge for a second? You know, one factor about the surge and the military success on that front is that it's required so many military resources in terms of our brave soldiers and Marines and airmen and sailors. And when they come home, they're not necessarily taken care of. This talking point of supporting the troops and as a way to sell these supplemental bills.
Says? Judy Biggert says support the troops.
She does.
We could say, let me just interject, you're giving very specific answers here, and I appreciate that, because if you go to Judy Biggert's website, which I've done, I don't find all the answers there. That's why we want Congressman Biggert to come out here separately and with you, Scott.
That'd be great. But when we say support the troops, that doesn't stop at the battle's edge. That philosophy of supporting our troops needs to follow them home. And Judy Biggert voted against VA funding, voted against this new GI Bill. These are unconscionable hypocrisies, in my view, when we use that phrase to support the funding of the war without timelines or accountability, but not to support them in their human needs.
But get to my question
back in their
now.
families. Let's get back to the surge. So,
what we should do now, post June 20, 2008.
I'm in quite close agreement with Senator Obama on his plan. My sense is that if we have a strategic, phased withdrawal that starts now and provides that accountability, that we can empower the Iraqi government to take the further steps, that we're in agreement that they've taken some steps. Now let's empower them to take further steps to stand up for themselves and protect the Iraqi people.
What if they take those steps and 6 months later, with us taking out, say, 40,000 troops, they say to us, you know, we're not quite ready. We appreciate you've got to eventually bring these troops down, but close it down for a little bit. Give us a chance. We're making progress economically, militarily, even diplomatically. The Iraqi government says that to us, says that to Barack Obama as president. You think Barack ought to change at that point?
I think that we have to be reality-based. When we're formulating policy, that's as important as the safety of our troops, as the future of the country of Iraq. We have to be reality-based. And that's my complaint with the Bush administration.
But what does that mean?
Judy Biggert.
Go forward with my hypothetical. 6 months into a Barack Obama presidency, he's taken out 40,000 troops, 50,000 brigade a month. And the Iraqi government says, we need a little more time, slow down the troop withdrawal. Does Barack listen to them and try to give this government in Iraq a chance to succeed?
I mean, my sense is that we want
Should he? I'm not predicting what he would, but should he?
Right. We want to listen to the Iraqi government. We want to listen to the generals on the ground. We want to have a policy that makes sense. But if we have the intention clear in the minds of both the Iraqi government and our senior military leadership, if they have a goal to shoot for, if they know that in 16 or 18 months or whatever the timeline we decide on is, then they can take the appropriate steps. They can do the tactical planning. And if something changes...
So your answer is keep the withdrawal going, notwithstanding what the Iraq government asks of President Barack Obama.
Sometimes you have to make tactical changes to a strategic plan.
And that's perfectly appropriate. You're saying you might recommend he make those tactical changes. Slow down the withdrawal.
I will listen to the experts in the field and try to make the mid-course corrections that we need within the overall framework of, I don't think we should have a permanent presence in Iraq.
Come back to that. Let's go over to the housing crisis, or so-called housing crisis. Some would say what much of the proposals are bailouts for irresponsible lenders and borrowers. You know, people who really knew they couldn't afford, they were buying more house than they could afford. The lenders knew that too. They went together, bad decisions. And now taxpayers who made good decisions are being asked for a $300 billion bailout almost as much as we spent on the Iraq War, more than we spent certainly for a year, maybe for 2 years. $300 billion bailout for the likes of Countrywide. And you've heard about the friends of Angelo Mazzillo, okay, the CEO. Those friends include Kent Conrad, Democrat, overseeing a lot of the regulation and this bill. Senator Chris Dodd, Democrat, overseeing a bunch of this. It's been said that they apparently got some favorable mortgages from Countrywide. They were friends of Angelo. We won't go into whether that was an ethical problem, but the point is, should those folks be deciding to do a bailout that's going to benefit a lot of irresponsible lenders like Countrywide and borrowers? Or should we, let the market work it out here?
This administration, with the support of Representative Biggert, have very much mismanaged the economy. One of the key things is the federal debt. We've gone from roughly $5 trillion to over $8 trillion in just 8 years. So more than a third of our total accumulated debt in the whole history of this republic since the revolution has been accumulated under this administration.
So it sounds like you're saying no on that irresponsible bailout, are you?
I will come back to that bailout. I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I am trying to set it in the larger framework of the management of the economy. The tax breaks that this administration has granted have benefited disproportionately the top 1% of income earners in this country and well-connected corporations who had the political insider.
We'll stop right there. We'll distract for a minute. Are you against, would you like to see all the Bush tax cuts repealed?
I would like to see tax cuts for the middle class and working families.
What does that mean? Well, in terms of middle class, should the tax cuts, at least the income, the marginal rates on income, should those tax cuts be repealed for people who earn more than $100,000, from people who earn more than $150,000, for families that earn more than $200,000? What level should we use to decide to repeal the tax cuts or raise income taxes? Give me a very specific answer.
I would like to see the Bush tax cuts expire without being reenacted in totality.
All of them, the marriage penalty, all that stuff comes back.
And then cut taxes for the middle class.
Define the middle class. What family income makes the person middle class?
I would like to see especially the top 1%.
What does that mean in terms of income? 200,000?
I'm not sure what that number is.
So you're going to go to somebody and say, tell the calculation.
What's the top 1%?
Some people say it's 200,000. Some say it's 300,000. I've heard both. Assuming it's 200,000, would you raise income on families with income above would you raise taxes on families who are earning 200,000 and above?
I don't consider letting the Bush tax cuts expire.
No, but they were all expired. Let me do it the other way. But you said then you would have tax cuts for the middle class. Would that be for families with income less than 200,000 or some different number?
The business of government is setting priorities, and we need to reprioritize.
Okay, but tell me the number. What's the priority?
I don't have an exact number. I'm going to negotiate that out. We need fiscal responsibility, and that is very key. And that is one thing that this administration has abdicated.
So let's go over to the bailouts. The $30 billion bailout for the likes of Countrywide. Do you want to do that or not?
Well,
it's a $300 billion bailout. I think it's $30 billion to benefit Countrywide, $270 billion to benefit a lot of other big irresponsible lenders. Okay, it's like big oil. These are big lenders. Big picture. Okay.
The one thing that's very important in addressing the housing crisis that's hurting people in my district. I mean, we have these towns: Plainfield, South Naperville, Bolingbrook. That's where so much of this new housing has come from. And here are people who have moved from Cook County or the city to get more housing space for their families affordably. But they're faced with the gas prices, as their commutes are quite long in many cases. They're going into the city or to Arlington Heights. So this really affects my district. And there are people who very responsibly stayed in mortgages that weren't advantageous.
Yes or no?
So
the bailout that Democrats are proposing for $300 billion, yes or no? You support that or not? The bailout of big lenders.
I was grieved to see how quickly the administration bailed out Wall Street. And
well, Bear Stearns wasn't quite a bailout because those folks lost their shirts, you know.
the investors in Bear Stearns lost their shirts.
The shareholders of Bear Stearns.
Did well with that.
That's different, but Bear Stearns lost their shirts. But
That's
I'm not getting an answer. A $300 billion
Would I support
bailout.
the current mortgage plan? Yes, I would.
Okay. Let's go over to gas prices. $4.25 per gallon. I think that's what we're seeing probably in your neck of the woods, as you mentioned, some of your areas.
About right.
50% of your districts in DuPage, 35% in Will County, 15% in Cook. Those folks are seeing that kind of prices, $4.25 per gallon, right?
Yes.
Time to expand drilling offshore, as John McCain has now signed on to, or at least he's saying, remove the federal moratorium. Let those states decide around the outer continental shelf whether they want to have offshore drilling. That's what McCain says. Obama says, no, it's not going to affect things soon enough. Keep that limit on. $4.25 per gallon. The McCain folks say now's the time. He didn't support it before, but he doesn't want people paying $4 a gallon, $3 a gallon, get it down to $2 a gallon, even though it's going to take a while. What would you say? Offshore drilling or no?
People are really hurting because of these gas prices. There's no question about how much of a strain that's putting on the budget.
I know that, so what's the answer? What do you want to do as congressman?
This administration has abdicated its responsibility on having an alternate energy policy. We have done nothing over the past 8 years.
Alternate energy, but that's going to take decades to get it going, isn't it? You're not going to get energy in the next year or two from. Well, some may say sooner.
All of it takes some time to get in.
Well, you do both. I think that's what McCain's saying. I think Obama's saying that. Do both. Do the alternate energy, nuclear power. Should we bring back nuclear power?
My sense on both drilling and nuclear power is they may make sense in the short to medium term. But I think the clear answer for the long term is alternate energy, whether it's energy recycling. So
you support, but you support that offshore drilling.
But let me
Is that yes or no, and then you can expand on it. But yes or no, you support offshore drilling or not?
One thing about offshore drilling is there's 60,000 acres that are currently leased by the oil companies that are not being drilled. So of course they should drill in the property that they're leasing.
Well, it takes a long time. Yeah, those are 10-year leases. You have to explore. You got to decide where the oil is. There may not be oil.
They're doing some exploring.
Okay, but do you want to expand, make more offshore drilling available to the oil companies?
I want a sensitive, common sense approach to that. If we need to open up some more acreage offshore, I'm not terminally opposed to that.
Okay.
I think if that's part of a medium-term solution to energy independence that focuses on investment in alternative energy, in solar, in wind, in geothermal, and hydroelectric, then that makes sense.
Okay. Healthcare, big issue. You've talked about it. You don't like the number of uninsured people. You want to do something about it. Some people have suggested expand Medicare, make it available to everybody. The Medicare system, just lower the age from 60 to 65. Others have said expand the federal employee system, which seems to work pretty well for federal employees. Open that up to everybody. Others have said let's have tax credits for everybody. People can decide individually they want. Start cutting the tie between employer insurance or employer financed health care insurance and let individuals decide. What does Scott Harper say? Have I mentioned anything that seems attractive, or would you come up with yet another proposal?
Well, first of all, beyond the 47 million people who are uninsured, which I think is a travesty in a nation as large and wealthy as ours, there's also the estimated 100 million people who are underinsured, who they're one illness away from economic disaster because their copays are so high.
So what do you want to do? What's the solution?
So I think universal care is what we need, and I will support any plan that gets us closer to, or hopefully achieves,
expand the Medicare to make it available to everybody who lower age. Would you do that? That's one.
If that plan could get the health care costs off business, and I'm a small businessman. We provided health care to our employees, and if that could get.
What about doing it for individuals? Give them $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 tax credits. Make it refundable so people who don't pay that much in taxes would also get the benefit of that. They could go out and buy their own health care insurance with that refundable tax credit. Would you go down that road?
I'm open to all the solutions.
You would consider that as well?
I would. I would consider every solution that got us to universal care, and some combination of them.
All right, trade. Free trade, fair trade, what?
Fair trade.
That means environmental standards, labor standards. You would not support the Caribbean Free Trade Agreement, okay? Is that right?
The which one?
Excuse me, the Colombian Free Trade Agreement, which I guess is just sitting there because it's being held up by the Democratic majority in the House, as I understand it. The administration says we've negotiated. They'd like to vote on the Colombia Free Trade Agreement being held up. What do you say? If you were there, would you push for a vote?
I am, as you mentioned at the top of the show, I come out of the business community. I spent a lot of years of my career working with distribution centers and factories, both in this country and around the globe. And so I understand how globalization works on the ground. I think globalization is something that we need to deal with.
Right.
And it's got
Should we have a vote? Should we have a vote on the
losers.
Colombian Free Trade Agreement?
Should we have a vote?
On the Colombia Free Trade Agreement? Yeah. Would you like to see it?
I'm not in favor of that
You're
trade
not,
agreement.
but you would allow a vote? Would you repeal NAFTA?
If I were the Speaker of the House,
would you repeal NAFTA?
I think NAFTA has pros and cons, and I would look at the details of it. I think it's...
So you're not sure you want to repeal it?
I'm not sure I want to repeal it.
Same thing with CAFTA? That was the Caribbean, sound right, but I think it's CAFTA.
Central American.
Excuse me, thanks for the correction. Central American Free Trade Agreement. Would you support that?
Well, it's currently the law of the
right.
land.
Would you like to see that repealed?
Would I fight for its repeal? Right. I don't think I would have voted for it if I had been in the House at the time.
Let's go very quickly over to the social issues. Guns, gays, guns, abortion. Okay, guns, gays, God, and abortion. I think that's what Howard Dean said. Democrats need to talk more about that. And we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Scott Harper, who's running for Congress. He is running in the 13th Congressional District, and he's the Democrat running against the Republican incumbent, Judy Biggert. As we said before, we've spoken with Congresswoman Biggert about coming out. She seems a bit slow in the last month or two to get back. We don't endorse candidates, but we do endorse that every candidate, the notion that every candidate should do what Scott Harper has done. Come here, face the issues, talk about it, communicate with our viewers and his voters. Thanks again so much for coming, Scott. We hope Congresswoman Biggert will follow your model. Okay.
I hope to sit on a set with her.
All right, very quickly, I know just very quick, the 13th Congressional District is changing, the demographics is changing, is that right?
It sure is.
How is it changing? Give me 30 seconds on it. That's all we have.
It's changing as people come into the district from Cook County. It's becoming more and more Democratic. But beyond the demographic change, there's a spirit of change. The people are so frustrated with how far to the right the Republican Party has gone.
So you think you're going to ride that crest? That's what you're saying. Social issues, abortion. Would you support the ban on partial birth abortion? There was a congressional ban. It was voted. It was affirmed by the Supreme Court. Ban on partial birth abortion. Yes or no? Support it?
I am a pro-choice candidate, and I'm proud to support a woman's right to choose.
So you would like to see that ban overturned?
I'm worried about the implications of that ban.
Excuse me. Would you like to repeal? Would you like to bring back the ban on assault weapons, which lapsed the federal ban?
On guns, I think the Second Amendment is very important.
But the ban on assault weapons, should it be brought back, the federal ban?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Same-sex marriage?